I was glancing at the order of service and I realized that there was a typo. The sermon today is supposed to be imagination beyond intent, not impact. That's important. And I'll tell you why. That's why I'm standing here. I grew up in Croton-on-Hudson, New York, a small town about 25 miles north of New York City. As teenagers, I and a group of my friends would drive into Manhattan every so often just to hang out, catch a show. It was a big deal to drive into the city. For some reason, the train was too expensive. I'm not exactly sure why we didn't take the train. We'd pile into my old Ford Galaxy, and we'd wind our way south. And we were broke, so we didn't want to pay for the tolls to go over the bridge, and the cheapest bridge to get into Manhattan at that time was the Madison Avenue Bridge, which linked South Bronx into the Upper East Side. Being white kids from the suburbs, we had heard all the urban myths about being carjacked in New York City. So as we approached the Bronx, we would lock our doors and try to avoid being stopped at a light. All around us, of course, was the poverty of the South Bronx, which is now improved much more than it was at the time. However, it was very poor, and all the people who lived there were brown or black. And we would talk, my friends and I can remember having these conversations about how we wish this poverty could come to an end, sort of good wishes from people who were fairly removed. Imagination, though, did not create that reality alone. As Ruha Benjamin put it in her latest work, Imagination, a Manifesto, a world that relies on social inequality to keep its machinery running can only afford a handful of people to imagine themselves gifted. Gifted, she wrote, are those designated, destined leaders, visionaries, and innovators, and those who have time and resources to design the future, while the masses often are trained to sit still, raise their hands, and take instruction. It's a harsh way of looking at all this world we're in right now, but I don't think it's inaccurate. See, imagination can be both positive and negative. We generally see imagination as a positive thing, but there is such a thing as a negative imagination. It was negative imagination that conjured up racism and the prison industrial complex and the myth that black men are better athletes. The fact of the matter is that better doesn't always mean better for everyone, and sometimes it means worse for some. I spent a lot of time thinking about residential segregation in America, which is the result of our system, the de jure laws and policies of government that keeps people of color out of white neighborhoods. Richard Rothstein wrote in his book, The Color of Law, that racialized segregation is not the result of people of color wanting to live in poorer neighborhoods around their own kind. Racialized communities like the South Bronx were created intentionally over decades of zoning ordinances and loan requirements that redlined poor people, mostly people of color, out of all white neighborhoods. So it was no accident that all my friends in Croton-on-Hudson, New York, growing up were white people. There just weren't really any black folks around, and if they were, they had to be something remarkable to be able to afford to live there. Over a century of zoning restrictions has left suburbs, like mine growing up, I like this one, open to people who have created enough real estate wealth to own their homes. Wealth creation was denied to people of color, and it's a long story. The laws of our country, the practices even to the GI Bill, tell a story about how racism has had a hold on us for a very long time. The sad moral truth, and I don't mean to bring you totally down here, is that our intent and impact to keep people of color out of white neighborhoods has resulted in a culture of white power that exists still today. And while later years would seek to correct this, and there has been some change, zoning restrictions, affordable housing, mandates to have affordable housing in some municipalities and affordable housing in some state laws, have created a certain amount of opportunity for people of color who normally wouldn't find their way into these neighborhoods to find their way in, but often affordable usually meant those who were retired on fixed income, who were already living there. That is, mostly people who are white. Throughout my ministry, I have tried to create and work with congregations to understand the power of racism in our lives, not as something that is intractable, but something that we can do something about. And I've done this often with the conversation around a covenant. Unitarian Universalism is a religion of covenants. It's an old word, but it means a mutual promise. And we have a great team working on this right now to create a covenant of right relationship that we'll be able to use with one another as we continue to grow. And we'll continue to change, because we'll see different kinds of folks walk through our doors all the time. One near universal tenet of most covenants of good relationship that are out there is what is often called assume good intentions. I often hear this. In fact, I used it. Many years ago, when I was doing a course on entrepreneurial ministry, the group I was with, there's a little covenant building exercise at the beginning to talk about how we're going to be with one another. And we add different phrases, and we were all ministers, and so, we're full of the language. And I said, oh yeah, let's assume best intentions, shall we? And the group leader, who was very savvy, asked if anyone had any objections. An African-American colleague of mine raised her hand and she said, I do. If I walk into a room of well-meaning white people, like most of you in this room, people that I know, that are friends of mine, I am not always able to assume good intentions. Because the fact of the matter is that almost all of you will inadvertently say something that is racist, and I'll be hurt. Black people deal with this constantly, and white people don't seem to notice the slight. And if I were to say something that, to the effect of that was hurtful, you of course would truly and deeply apologize, and you would often say, but that was not my intent. But she said, don't you see? It doesn't matter what your intent was, because it still hurts. And your intent didn't excuse the racism. The damage had been done, and she said, remember that intent is not the same thing as impact. Impact is what matters. And we can't always go around assuming good intentions when those intentions continue to perpetuate racism. Finally, she said, ask yourself, my dear colleagues, what is the impact of my actions and how can I change that? The room was silent. And I never used that phrase again. Beloveds, I'm not calling you racists. I want to be clear about that. I believe very, very fully in the heart of my soul that we are what Ibram Kendi once called working towards being better anti-racists. It's not our identity that makes us racist. It's what we do. And we are often not even aware of it. I'm not often aware of it. We're trying to do the right thing, and I want to applaud you for that, because you are doing the right thing. The world is changing. This little corner of the world here is changing. This community is changing. Our intent here is to grow spiritually, to find new ways in which we can be in this troubled and broken world in which we are trying to find our way, in which we're trying to actually survive right now. I get that. I am proud of what we've done, and there's deeper work still to do, deeper spiritual work in the years ahead. I want you, though, to understand that intention is not the same thing as impact, and that our imaginations about what impact could mean for people needs to move beyond just what we see. We need to be able to empathize with other people, to be able to understand where they may be coming from. And I think that will be very powerful when we learn to do that. Can you hear me? So, an example from my own life. I always use examples from my own life because I'm far, far from where I should be. Anytime I'm in a big city, let's say New York again, I'll take the wallet out of my back pocket and put it in my front pocket. Now, if you ask Francis, I ought to not be carrying my wallet at all. I should have a man bag like the Europeans do. But I haven't quite gotten there. So they're in my back pocket or my front pocket. And then as I'm walking down streets, if I see an unfamiliar situation that I'm a little worried about, I'll put my hand in my pocket. Now that's a subtle cue that I know African American friends of mine have told me that that's actually what happens. They see that happening. And if I don't know the neighborhood at all, I'm even more cautious. And I'm letting fear grab a hold of me and hold me in a way that I don't want it to hold me. I don't intend that to happen. I'd like to imagine myself as something else. I have an African American friend of mine who says when he's in a crowded city or a place that doesn't look particularly safe, he whistles Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And everybody's shoulders relax. Friends, we need to imagine good intentions in order to live this world we're in order to be able to change what seems around us to be a whirlpool, maybe even a cesspool of worry. And we do use our best intentions most of the time, but we can't always assume they have the same impact on other people. I've been thinking a lot about the idea of reparation in my last several years, reparations for African American communities, generations of African Americans who were enslaved and in the continuing inequity of racism. The enslavement which made much of the wealth that we get to enjoy today, I would say. And whenever I talk about this, I inevitably run into somebody who says, why should I worry about something that I never did anything about? I never enslaved these people. I worked hard for my money. Guess what? People of color work hard for their money too. But they have an ability we have an ability to earn that money as the result of generations of policies and laws that have preserved and increased our wealth, even if your earned fortune was done completely on your own. While white families pass down wealth from real estate are averaging about $150,000 per generation, black and brown families who own their homes pass down less than $12,000 per generation. That's the impact. As we imagine ourselves living into the promise of a sanctuary for all, and I do believe that is what we are becoming. I see it every week. I see new people here, and welcome. We're glad you're here. Glad you're a part of us. Glad you're a part of this community, this place where joy is an act of resistance, as Audre Lorde said. Because I have a dream that we will be a congregation when I leave of 700 people. And we'll have every generation here. We'll have every ethnicity, every gender identity, every level ability, and every class worshiping and building a community here, this community, amidst the communities that we're a part of, and I don't mean just geographically. Reaching out to free those who are imprisoned. Someone asked me not too long ago, can I sum up the mission of our congregation in a couple of words? And I said, sure. We're here to save lives. Now, sometimes I say that and people think it's hyperbole, but it's not hyperbole. I've seen lives saved here. I watch it happen. This miracle happens all the time. You save lives. You may not know it, but you make life possible for people who have no hope. So that's why this is important for us. This is important for us to understand the imagination that we need to be able to see the impact of who we are and the actions we take to truly welcome people through our doors. Can you hear me on this? After the service today, we'll have a short session for those who are considering membership in our congregation. If you've been coming for a while and thinking, well, I like this place, it's my spiritual home, I come here, I'm renewed, I find joy and energy, and I'm able to move through the world, stop by 11:15 in the McGinnis room, and we'll have a little session. I'll do some talking about Unitarian Universalism, and our leaders will be there to talk a little bit about what's happening with us here, and the membership book will be available because, friends, we need you now. We need you right now. We need you to be part of this because this is what's going to change the world. Opportunities for renewal and hope are right here. And I know we have many, many things that we're worried about. One of the things that worries me what does worry me every day is the situation in Gaza, the situation in Israel. I know the Israelis, many Israelis don't sanction what their government is doing. And the Palestinians who were persecuted, and children are now starving. Now, while the causes for that conflict are millennia old, that doesn't mean we can't still imagine an impact greater than the one we're living. So tomorrow night, we'll have two wonderful people here, Melissa Evans, who is from our congregation, and her husband, who have been doing work on the ground with Palestinians and Israelis bringing peace to the Middle East. Citizen groups. And they'll be in the McGinnis room at 7 p.m., and I hope you'll join me for a conversation about Israel and Palestine. Part of our imagination needs to include understanding struggles that we can speak compassionately about. The thing that makes me saddest about all that's wrong in the world is that people are getting hurt. It's not even political. It's deeper than political. Krista Tippett just the other day put on her podcast On Being two activists who are doing amazing work in the Middle East, a Jewish activist and a Palestinian activist, and they were imagining a future beyond what we have now. And the Palestinian author, Loa Wated, said, when we talk about trauma, we need to talk about feeling. Not a psychological thing, he said. I'm thinking about the feeling that makes us see the world differently than the way it is, the way it could be. As we recognize these amazing volunteers, all of you, as we recognize the world in which we live and the work that's before us, as we recognize our bridging seniors and the amazing worlds they're going to have to, be in and create a new life in, let us also imagine ourselves as a community that is growing in new and exciting ways. We've had a wonderful experience this past spring working on environmental justice and biodiversity, and I want to thank everybody who worked on that. And this fall, we're going to be talking about the problem of housing insecurity, particularly in the communities in which we live. Our home team, that's what we're calling us, the home team, is working on that. We can back meaningful zoning laws that change the way it is for BIPOC folks. And we can ally with organizations that will pass meaningful legislation. But most of all, I want us, regardless of our intention, to imagine our impact far beyond our reality here. The poet Hannah Mitchell wrote that imagination plants the inconceivable in our minds and makes our hearts long for it to be true. That we are bearing witness to imagination's mending. It's never been a panacea, she wrote. A story has never cured anxiety, and a song has never halted grief. But sharp edges are dulled, and finding joy feels less daunting, and mending occurs. While leaving us far from healed, we are better before when that imagination is put to work. We can be the salvation we've been dreaming of, even here, right here in this room and online, in the community of people that are here and surround us. At this moment, we can go boldly into the crucible and we can see a new world emerging, to answer the call to water the new seeds. We can imagine a world where the impact is not hurt, but love. I'll close this with this quick reading from Heather McGhee. Heather McGhee wrote a book not long ago called The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. And she wrote that racism hurts us all. Poor white people who vote against unionizing because black people may rise with them are being hurt. This is the hurt that elected Donald Trump. Still, she is optimistic, and she said, I'm fundamentally a hopeful person because I know that decisions made in the world as it is could be decisions that better change it. Nothing about our situation is inevitable, she wrote, but you can't solve a problem with the consciousness that created it. Beloveds, we can marry our best intentions with the impact of our actions, and in doing, bring us closer to that dream of the beloved community that I know we are called to become. I invite you on this journey with me, with us, and may the journey begin. Amen.